Greetings, everyone. We'd like to share a bit more information about the physical description of Jesus Christ in the Bible. We will more carefully scrutinize this matter. For additional information, you can always watch our first video on the physical description of Jesus Christ. We trust you find it very informational and educational as well. So we ask that you give us your consideration in what we are about to share with you. Listen very carefully, brothers and sisters. The physical descriptions of Jesus are not meant to be taken literally. Like many other stories in the Bible, as I've emphasized numerous times throughout my videos, the physical description of Jesus, or Christ if you will, is purely allegorical. The ancients used allegory, metaphors, and symbolism to describe and explain how non-physical, invisible forces brought the visible universe into existence. This, in essence, is what the Bible is about, and the description of Christ is no exception. Please allow me to prove my position. If we look at Revelations chapter 1, verse 13, it reads, "And in the midst of the seven candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle." Now, the seven candlesticks indicate being illuminated, or the seven planes carrying their own light. Garment is the aura around the earth, just like an actual garment surrounds the individual wearing it. Please keep in mind, the physical body is being used as an analogy to, metaphor, symbol of the earth itself. I might also add that the seven planes coming down from highest to lowest are: 1. Universal mind, universal consciousness, God, if you will. 2. The ethereal plane, or plane of information or knowledge. This is the plane where universal mind releases itself in order to be received by its creation. Very briefly, it is analogous to, let's say, your mother writing down the chores she wants you to perform while she's at work. For the sake of this example, your mother is universal mind. I think she'd appreciate you calling her that, by the way. Now, she releases her mind or thoughts in order to be perceived. Her way of doing so is by writing down her thoughts. Her thoughts written down are the ethereal plane. I trust I have been clear. Now, number 3, the astral plane, or plane of nerves, which is that which causes us to act on the information or knowledge we gather. Following our example, the astral plane, or plane of nerves, activates us to perform the chores that she wrote down for us. It is the plane that allows for an effect to be made on us regarding the information we receive. I trust that was clear. Number 4, the plane of reason, or a two-legged animal, or simply the human plane. Number 5, the first earth plane of mobility or animation, hence the animal kingdom. Number 6, the plane of vegetation, the plane that allows the earth to live, or simply the plant kingdom. And number 7, the plane of latent matter, or the rock mineral kingdom, or simply the establishment of the physical earth itself. Okay, now let's deal with paps in that verse. Oh boy. Listen very carefully, brothers and sisters. Paps is exclusively a reference to females. Men do not have paps. So you may be asking yourself, why does it mention Christ as having paps then, if paps is exclusively female? It is analogous to the fertility and sustenance of the earth. It is analogous to the fertility and sustenance of the earth. The reason this verse describes the Son of Man with female paps is because it is attempting to demonstrate that male and female aspects, the male and female aspects that the genetic principle carries. This may be a poor way of doing it though. Again, paps is exclusively a reference to females. Men are not described as having paps because men do not have paps. Again, please understand that the human body is being used to represent the earth and various forces that brought the earth into existence. Some like to embellish the mention of girdle by substituting belt for girdle. But the mention of girdle may also be construed as a female reference for the same reason that I explained for the use of paps. Now, let's look at Revelation, chapter 1, verse 14. His head and hair were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire. His head and hair being white is an expression of the highest plane in evolution. You can substitute clear or colorless for white, but it's much easier to make the point using white instead of clear, since clear can't be seen. His head and hair being white is also an indication of the more refined elements on earth as well. I'll elaborate on this momentarily. Wool is indication of Christ being called the shepherd for his people who are called his lamb, and lamb have wool. Furthermore, wool was the primary fabric used to clothe human beings at that time. His eyes as a flame of fire is indication of the purification process applied to certain elements for their refinement. Once certain elements are purified, they become clear of any dross. Once again, the term white is used in place of clear or colorless so that the reader can more easily perceive it. You may also consider that his eyes as a flame of fire is indication of light penetrating through the darkness of space or the darkness of earth/matter. Now, Revelation 1, verse 15. And his feet like unto fine brass, as if they were burned in a furnace, and his voice the sound of many waters. This is the most oft-quoted verse in the Bible when individuals attempt to demonstrate that Revelation is describing a physical human being. Nevertheless, his feet described as fine brass contradicts the way his feet are described in Daniel chapter 2, verses 32 through 33, which I will address momentarily as well. Again, many of these translations and transliterations in the Bible leave much to be desired. In any case, the lowest plane of evolution or lesser refined elements. Forgive me, let me go back and read that. I think I missed something there. In any case, we are impressed that his feet described as brass is simply an attempt to describe the lowest plane of evolution or lesser refined elements. His voice, the sound of many waters, is just a reminder of one of the four elements of life on earth. One of the four primary elements of life on earth. We have his voice, water and wind or air. We have his feet, earth. We have his eyes of flame, fire. These are the four primary elements, brothers and sisters: water, wind, earth, and fire. The human form is simply being used as a metaphor to earth and its four essential elements. Again, this is not a description of an actual human being. It is all analogous, all a metaphor, all symbolism, or whatever comparative term you would like to use. Now, much to my delight, I received a Facebook response to my first video on the physical description of Christ. I will share the verses that this gentleman posted and my response to it, and then merge the information with what I have been elucidating. In a somewhat sarcastic manner, he asks, "So, are these esoteric also?" He was referring to the verses I'm about to read. Daniel chapter 7, verse 9. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of the Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. He also quoted Daniel chapter 10, verses 5 through 6. Then I lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with fine gold of Uphaz. His body also was like the beryl, and his face as the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire, and his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. Now, here's my response. Listen very carefully, brothers and sisters. Daniel chapter 2, verses 32 through 33, King James Version. The image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. I'm going to read that one more time. This is Daniel chapter 2, verses 32 through 33, King James Version. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. I posted these verses as complement to the ones you posted. They are all saturated with allegory, because the human being is the highest of the four earth planes: earth, plant, four-legged animal, then two-legged animal or human. The human form is often used to demonstrate the finer and lesser elements or forces on earth established by universal, cosmic mind, or God, if you will. Notice that the video quotes Jesus' hair as white and his feet like brass. This is simply an indication of the lowest plane, his feet, or least refined elements of matter being darker in color, like the earth itself, and the highest, his hair, or most refined elemental plane being white. You can substitute clear for white. Also, his feet connect to the earth, hence the darker color. His head or hair reaches the sky, hence the lighter color or aura. Garment in your verses is described as white because it surrounds an aura, the lower, darker elements, arms, legs, feet. In the verses I listed, notice a very interesting pattern. You have gold, then silver, then brass, then iron, then clay. This is perhaps the clearest evidence that the Bible is trying to convey most refined elements down to lesser refined elements as it goes from gold down to clay. Also, it could not be describing an actual human being because it says his arms are silver and his belly and thighs brass or brown. That would be a very awkward looking man. Plus, why would the Bible need to describe a man's belly and thighs? This is all just a reminder of the way the energy of cosmic mind goes down, involution, into matter, and even crystallizes into matter. The opposite of involution is evolution, which is mind energy rising up out of matter and returning to its source. Perhaps not so clearly, but the Bible is attempting to describe the various elements that universal mind is manifesting as the earth is being created. There are finer and less refined elements: gold, silver, clay. There are the four essential elements that create life: earth, fire, air, water. Since the human being is the highest culmination of all of these forces, the human form is used to demonstrate them. Clay, or earth, represents the molding of the dense human body, and so on. Though this is far from perfect, I trust I have been at least somewhat clear. Okay, that's the end of my Facebook response to him. Okay, brothers and sisters, I mentioned earlier that the description of Jesus' feet in Revelations 1, verse 15, contradicts the way his feet are described in Daniel 2, 32 through 33, which describes his feet as part iron and part clay. Brothers and sisters, feet described as polished brass is not the same as feet described as part iron and part clay. Again, although it may be confusing to read his feet described differently in different parts of the Bible, the main purpose of the description is simply to emphasize the elements on earth as manifested by the genetic principle. Now, let me add to my response to him by also emphasizing more obvious allegory, even in the verses that he listed, which are Daniel chapter 7, verse 9, and Daniel chapter 10, verses 5 through 6. Christ's loins were girded with fine gold, which is simply another emphasis on the earth's elements. Christ's body is described as beryl, and that's B-E-R-Y-L, which is an emphasis on earth's minerals. Christ's face described as lightning, another emphasis on elemental or cosmic forces. Christ's eyes like fire, and his arms and feet like brass, more emphasis on earth's elements. Again, brothers and sisters, these verses are not meant to be understood as descriptions of an actual human being. That would be ludicrous. All of these verses, which contain clear mineral and elemental descriptions, are meant to be understood allegorically. Allegorically. I must re-emphasize that in Daniel 2, 32 through 33, his breast or chest and his arms are described as silver. Silver, brothers and sisters. Obviously, this is not a physical description unless you accept that a black man had feet the color of brass and a chest and arms the color of silver. Once again, as I asserted and broke down in my first video about the physical description of Jesus, these descriptions, as well as other stories in the Bible, are simply and purely allegorical. Our ancient ancestors used physical reality to describe and explain non-physical, invisible forces, activities, vibrations, phenomena, or whatever term you choose. I must declare that even if my interpretations of the physical descriptions are not 100% accurate, the primary point is simply to understand that this is all allegory. All allegory. Brothers and sisters, I am a student of life. Therefore, I aspire to learn daily. What I've presented to you was done so with a great deal of reason. Simple reason. And reasoning with one another is what we must do to establish effective communication. I trust you have found my discourse informational, educational, and inspirational. Thank you for your time and consideration. Love and harmony, Brother Osiris.